welcome, John Prendergast. I'm so glad to have another conversation with you here on my channel.
Nice to be back, Sarah.
Yeah, for sure. And for those of you who didn't catch the initial conversation, I'll link it here. But John has a new book called Your Deepest Ground. And I'm just going to read a little bit about the author. John J. Prendergast, PhD, is the author of The Deep Heart, Our Portal to Presence, and In Touch, How to Tune In to the Inner Guidance of Your Body and Trust Yourself. He is a retired adjunct professor of psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies, where he taught and supervised master's level counseling students for 23 years. Now retired, he was also a licensed psychotherapist in private practice from 1986 to 2021. And you studied for many years with the European sage Dr. Jean Klein and also Adyashanti, who offered him Dharma transmission in 2023. John was also invited to share the Dharma by Dorothy Hunt. And he offers online programs through various organizations, and I'll link his bio here.
And we're none of our biography.
What's that?
We're not our biography
And
either.
we're not our biography. I know it's like
Yeah.
I've done this
Like,
and
here's a story, and that's not who I am. But
I know, and sometimes you're listening to bio, you're like, wow, who's that? Oh, right. Okay, whatever. Um, yeah, so I wanted to open with how kind of impressed I am with how you attune to people when you work with them. So in groups, and I would imagine one-on-one, and you meet people where they're at. And I find that models to people how to attune to themselves, and how
Mhm.
to attune to others, of course. But wherever we're at is the starting point. So I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit on that from your years of experience.
Mm, mm. Well, really, what we're talking about is listening. And there are different dimensions of listening, different ways of listening. The most obvious is auditorily, and actually paying attention. Um, and rather than uh, inserting our own thoughts and stories, really letting them go and being actually available and open. And as there's a real willingness and ability, because sometimes we don't have the ability, but both a willingness and a capacity, a growing capacity and ability to actually drop one's own story and really listen, then different levels of listening unfold. There's a cognitive listening, like on a mental level, we're understanding the kind of
Mhm.
narrative that someone is sharing. There's an emotional listening, like we're attuning, so we're listening, we're getting the world view, we're getting the self world view on
Yeah.
one level, in terms conceptually. We're also getting the feeling tone. And that that can sometimes be obvious if someone's very upset or charged, but often it's subtler. There's a quieter emotional tone that's accompanying the narrative, the self-world narrative. Then there's listening even more deeply, which is more of a subtle somatic attunement. And this actually requires a familiarity with one's own body mind. It's as if we're a musical instrument, like, let's say a stringed instrument, a cello or a guitar. And the more attuned this instrument is, the quieter and the more finely tuned it is, the more it vibrates in accord,
Yes.
resonantly
Yeah.
with the person that we're listening to. And it's not an act of effort, it's not an efforting, it's a quiet listening and internal attunement, a willingness to be able to notice, oh, I'm sensing something in the heart. I'm sensing something in the solar plexus. I notice my throat's getting tight. I'm feeling kind of a ball of energy, whatever may be going on here. And knowing oneself And this is interesting because we need to know our own instrument well and to be able to discern what's our own conditioning, yeah,
Yes.
right? And what it is that's actually resonant with the other person. So, because we can easily get activated and stimulated by what someone's saying, and then imagine that our reaction is what they're experiencing, and it may not
Right.
be at all. So here's where our own self-honesty, our own vulnerability, our willingness to take a look and get to know our own reactivity is
Yeah.
very important. And so we can begin to discern what is our stuff, this particular body mind, and what is, having to do with the other person. And that takes some maturity and some honesty and some self-investigation.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people consider themselves empaths, highly sensitive. I mean, I work with a lot of neurodivergent people where
Mhm,
we can be exquisitely attuned to others. And often people come to me and say, I don't know how to tell the difference between my stuff and other people's stuff.
mhm,
And then there's also the mind trip we can play on ourselves, which is like, well, it's all one thing, so there are no others. But at the relative level,
mhm.
there is this energetic baggage that we carry,
Absolutely.
that are,
Emotional, energetic, I mean, just all sorts of conditioning.
yeah,
And that's an interesting question we can kind of look into right now. Well, let me just kind of finish the listening piece
yeah,
and then come back to this because it's actually quite important, particularly for people who are highly sensitive, I think, or empaths, natural empaths. So that listening, assuming that we're relatively clear, because I don't think there's any kind of absolute clarity, but we have, and there's a certain humility, like we're sitting with someone, we're listening, we're feeling or sensing something. We don't necessarily assume I know this is what you're feeling, but it might be. And so there's a kind of humility. I'm experiencing this. I'm wondering if it has something to do with you. Does this resonate for you? Is there anything here? Maybe it's just my stuff. So
yeah,
this is sort of that willingness to not know, the willingness to ask, the willingness to find out, I think is very important because the ego can get in here and say, "I know you're feeling this," and
yeah,
that may or may not be true. So I always leave a question there. I have found over the years that that experience of resonance tends to be highly accurate, but occasionally it's off the mark, or occasionally I'll sense something, but my understanding of it may be different than what they're experiencing.
right,
And I want to know what they're experiencing, and I want to know what their understanding is, and then I can fine tune, what I'm experiencing. It's like I feel a contraction, but I don't know what it's about, right? I feel a
yeah,
disturbance, but it may not be what I think it is. But something to share. It's part of the conversation. Let's explore. Let's see what's resonant and works for you. So it's not only a kind of internal resonance, but there's an interpersonal conversation, in which there's a mutuality of exploration, a
yeah,
willingness to not know. So anyway, all of that is part of the listening, I think, these different dimensions. And the more clear we are within ourselves, the more open we are, the more humble we are, the more we're actually able to meet people where they are. And also another important part of listening is the ability to suspend judgment, right? That's part of our suspending the story. And ordinary conditioned mind tends to judge and compare, you know. So the more we can rest in and as open awareness, the less we have that interference, that kind of static, that comes in, this should or shouldn't be, or it needs to be, or something needs to happen. The more we are in our innocent attention, just really listening and attuning. And it's very interesting because this is a subtle process, because the
yeah.
mind always gets in there and thinks, okay, well, maybe if I say this, and this is kind of from the helper's point of view, if
You
I
want to help
you want to
and
help, you want to get them out of their suffering, you want to, and there's a certain kind of pressure if you're in a helping profession, you want to be able to offer something useful. All of that gets in the way, I find.
yep, I find that too. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And so the more we're just actually have no agenda to help or fix, the
Yeah.
more open and available and attuned we are. And that is in the field. now.
Right.
There's just a quality of open, loving, curious, affectionate attention, and that is felt
Yeah.
by the other person, and that becomes an invitation for a natural unfolding of experience. It's like that quality of listening, just just wanting to get to know more intimately, is such a felt invitation for experience to begin to unfold, and this is what our systems need, really, that quality of attention.
Yeah. For sure. Because so many of us didn't get it growing up. I mean, parenting is hard, so no matter what our parents were like. So that type of attunement can, I like what you said, can something can naturally unfold and people can discover for themselves what is here. With sensitive, intuitive people, especially when people are sort of discovering that they're intuitive, there can be that phase that people go through, which is, well, yeah, just like you said, I know what you're feeling. I know best. It's probably this. And that's why it's so paradoxical and so vital that you let go of needing to help at all. And you end up being a space in which help arises.
That's it. And even the whole idea of holding space for another, even that gets in the way. Like, I'm the one who's holding space. No, you're not.
Yeah,
No one's holding space.
right.
It's like we're relaxing into space. We're
Yeah,
letting ourselves be space in a way. And that
yeah,
space is the same here as it is there,
that's right.
right? So we're actually opening to essence, the shared essence, you
Hmm.
know. And that can be done, depends, if someone comes to you and they're kind of familiar with this approach, you can talk in this kind of way. Others, this is a very unusual way of thinking and feeling and experiencing. So you don't talk about it because it would
Yeah,
be alienating to do
yeah,
so. But it's still in the field. It's still
that's
that quality of openness and curious affection that naturally elicits the depths of experience. And it's felt. People feel the warmth. They
yeah,
feel the genuine willingness to be with the experience as it is,
yeah,
and thus we learn to listen, right? When we
yeah,
receive, I feel that with you, Sarah, like, and that just really invites, oh, I can listen to myself now, right?
yeah,
You're willing to listen to me. I guess I'm worth listening to. You're willing to be with me as I am. I guess I'm willing to be with myself as I am. And of course, that's fundamental, isn't it?
fundamental.
It's like that's where it all starts. Relationship with oneself, the willingness to be, in relationship with one's experience and oneself in this open way. And all other relationships radiate out from that. So instead of and that's a kind of homecoming. That's a deep settling, you know. It's like we can't really meet others unless we're at home in
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah. And meeting someone where they're at, meeting ourselves where we're at. And we talked about this a bit in the last conversation about how spiritual seekers want to get to the next thing and the next thing. They want to hurry up and heal. They want to hurry up and get through that block. It's so foundational. It's just you just start where you are. You just land right where you are.
How many people, you hear this language. I don't know why I'm still struggling with this.
I hear that a lot. Yeah.
After many years of whatever
Yeah.
practice, meditation, inquiry,
Yeah.
psychotherapy, I still feel. So that's the mind, right? There's that agenda, you know,
Yeah,
and
and
this.
agenda, living in time, it's got to happen.
Hmm.
Not happening fast enough. It's not happening on my timeline, which is all mine. So, um, yeah, and it's curious to me, yeah, because at some point on the path, I think I dropped that and I got really curious, like, oh, ooh, goody, this is coming up. And a deeper layer because it is like a spiral.
It very much so.
You hear that.
And there are layers to our conditioning, and so we can work a certain layer, with a good counselor, therapist, coach or whatever, and significantly resolve a certain layer of our conditioning. And then we come around to it again. It's like, oh, I worked on this. I thought I was done with this.
I thought I
And
was done. Yeah,
right? And then here it is again, but it's not the same actually.
that's right.
That's why the spiral model is, I think, very accurate. And it's interesting because it's, what are we spiraling down into and toward? It's like more closer and closer alignment, right? Like there's that circular, there's a descent, and there's also a growing intimacy, I would say, with our essential core.
Mm-hmm.
There's a core illumination, a core aliveness, and we're coming into alignment. We're increasingly closing the gap between our ordinary experience and our deepest knowing.
Yes. Alignment, that is a word that I use a lot. And again, the mind can say like, well, what needs to align if I've recognized my true nature? But there is a deepening over time. And I find a razor's edge that one starts to walk when there has been an awakening, a deep seeing, an opening, that you can feel when something doesn't quite feel right. Oh, and righting yourself. And it's like at the beginning of the spiritual path, we look at everything like, oh, there's something here for me to look at. I need to, maybe I just need to put up with the situation and work with my triggers. And then if there's been a big opening at the heart, it's like, oh, everything is fine. Situations and people can be aggravating or even toxic, and there's a level of tolerance because there's the peace that's unshakable. But then there's also this that comes online, which is, ooh, no, which feels like grinding gears, doesn't it?
It does. And this is the principle of resonance or dissonance internally. It's like as our system opens up, as we are more attuned, with this particular instrument and how we're functioning, it's like, well, what wants to come into our alignment? Our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our actions, our relationships, our work, you
I
know,
mean, just everything,
just not.
just all of it.
Yeah, just everything. And it's an ongoing process of, I think, attunement and alignment. And as it deepens, as this self-intimacy deepens, we notice the deviations more
Yes.
acutely. That's that grinding that you're speaking about. It's like, something off here, and and this is why honesty and vulnerability are so important. Self-honesty,
Yeah.
particularly. Not that we're, having to tell everyone every aspect of our experience, but
TMI.
right, but we're willing to acknowledge our actual experience as it is and not idealize it and not deny it and not split it off. But it's like, okay, yeah, that was kind of that felt off to me.
Yeah.
I said something, even we begin to notice it in our thinking. It's like,
Sure.
no, that's actually doesn't feel right. There's something off here. And then we're curious, like, so it becomes a pointer then.
Mhm.
That kind of dissonance is as valuable as a sense of resonance,
It's very valuable. Yeah.
right? It's like we kind of lean one way or another and we, no, that's not it. And no, that's not quite right. And that helps us come into alignment. So resonance and its polarity, dissonance,
Yeah.
become increasingly a kind of guide of the inner knowing in
Yeah.
terms of how we navigate our ordinary life.
Hmm. Well, and and you felt that resonance when you met your first teacher, Jean Klein. And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about what that was like, that knowing that you had.
Yeah, that was so remarkable. This was now I'd studied with different teachers before.
Uh-huh.
I would say my first introduction to contemplative practice was transcendental meditation,
Right.
and
Yes.
I spent some time with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Mhm.
I became a TM teacher. There was a certain resonance there. It wasn't not a profound resonance, but it was more with a tradition, I would say. In this case, it was Vedanta. And let me, I'll do this timeline a little bit earlier. When I was,
Yeah.
I think when I was 19, I read Yogananda's autobiography,
Oh,
Autobiography of a Yoga. That was like a door, the first door that opened. And there was something about that book, and that just, I knew he was speaking from a deep place and experiencing from a deep place. But there was also something about the tradition of Indian spirituality that I recognized. It's like, oh, I know this on some level. And I was so touched to read that book. And then I read Ramakrishna's biography, and and uh, and it's like there's a huge volume. And so I was reading into these
wow.
Indian saints and
Yeah.
yogis, and it was fascinating to me. And so I began a meditative practice, TM, became a TM teacher. Was briefly the chairman of a TM center in San Jose, by the way, or
Wonderful San Jose.
right, not far from Cupertino or Sunnyvale, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I became somewhat disenchanted with that organization, and I realized Maharishi wasn't my teacher. That was actually, it was interesting to talk
Mm.
about this because I was going to a TM weekend retreat as a TM teacher in Northern California, and I didn't think I needed a teacher. You know, I was like, okay, I have my practice, I have my understanding. I don't want a teacher. I don't need a teacher. You know, that's kind of, that was my anti-authoritarian
Yeah. Yeah.
reaction. And I'm sitting in the back of the car with a couple of other friends, we're going, and out of nowhere comes this inner knowing or voice that said, you need to find your teacher. It's like, what? You know? And so then, like, even though I had my practice and even though I was doing long meditation retreats and so on, it's like, that's interesting. Something inside my inner knowing has said, you need a teacher, you know? So I went off on a 6-month retreat, a cities course it was called in the mid
Oh, wow. You did the study
1970s.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't go to learn cities. I went to really find out whether Maharishi was my teacher or
Yeah.
not. And I concluded somewhere in the middle of the course, I was in Switzerland in the Alps, middle of a 6-month course, it's not him. And I really like, okay, well then who? And then a vision of Satya Sai Baba came. And I thought, oh, well, it's him. I'd read a book and a friend of mine was into Sai Baba. And so here's a kind of a dramatic, entry of another teacher. And so I spent maybe, 5 years with Satya Sai Baba thinking he was my teacher. Well, he
Wow.
was in a way. He was a teacher.
Yeah, he got you going.
And this was like a deeper dive into the devotional aspect of Hinduism and being of service. And there was definitely, it spoke to my devotional side
Yeah.
and developed that. But also there was an incongruence. There was something was off, and I wasn't fully trusting or attuned. And then I had a dream and Nisargadatta Maharaj showed himself. I didn't know who he was, but he said, in the dream, I know you're a devotee of Sai Baba, but you can spend some time with me. And it's like, who's this?
Who's this guy?
And
Wow.
in that dream, there was like a lucidity, a quality of wakefulness that was
Yeah.
extraordinarily powerful. So I read, I am that. And it's like, the bells and whistles were going off. It's like, okay, this is the one who is seeking is what is sought.
Yes.
So there's a direct pointing back to this, the subjectivity and the inherent openness of it. Then I met Jean Klein. So all that is prelude to this
It's important. Yeah.
story of inner teacher, outer teacher,
Yeah.
because the teacher always ultimately is our inner knowing. But
Yeah.
certain individuals show up and for a while play the role of reflecting back and pointing to the inner teacher.
Yes.
So Jean Klein was probably the most power. I think I speak of having two teachers, but the two most central teachers, I would say, or foundational teachers. And Jean Klein, he was a friend of mine, said, someone's coming to Sausalito, and I think you might enjoy seeing him. And immediately something said, yes, I'm going. And so this was in 1983, so 42 years ago.
Mhm.
And I was a graduate student at that point, working on my, no, I'd started my doctorate, I think. And I remember there was an L-shaped room, and I walked in, so I couldn't see Jean. And there were just, I could see there were some chairs and so on. But I walked in, and my normally busy mind just stopped. It's like, whoa,
Mhm.
no more thinking, or very little thinking. I had the thought, I wasn't thinking, so
Right.
there, there was some thought.
That.
I wasn't brain dead, but there was a sudden silence and like presence in the room that immediately there was like, wow, something's here. And I
Mhm.
and I remember sitting down. It's a very vivid memory, even though it was decades ago. Sat a few rows back, and here's this elderly, you're elderly, my age now, right, mid 70s, European gentleman, and he began to speak, and it was very kind of formal, philosophic Vedanta. It's just like
Mhm.
subject and object, and it's very kind of precise and with a heavy European accented
Yeah.
English. So some of the words I didn't understand, and some of the words that I did understand, I didn't really understand.
Right.
It didn't matter. It's like the inner knowing was, I've met my teacher, my true teacher. There was a knowing. It's
Oh.
like, here's my teacher. And there was so much feeling just from the depths of the heart, so much gratitude. And I went up afterwards to his assistant, who turned out to be his wife, and I said, how do I become a student? And so I had an individual meeting with Jean. A week later, he was in Berkeley. And there was just immediate resonance. I told him a little bit about my background and my search, and basically he said, welcome. And I studied with Jean from 1983 to 95, and then he retired. He had a series of small strokes, and then that basically prevented him from teaching, and he died a few years later.
Mhm.
And just to kind of complete the story, after Jean died in 98, 99, I went to a talk in Oakland that Adya was giving, a friend of mine, and I went and I and I listened. He's totally different presentation than Jean Klein.
Yeah.
Jean Klein, this very cultivated, cultured, elegant European gentleman, and Adya, this kind of brash young Californian, and same presence. It's like, oh my goodness, same awareness here,
Oh.
very different packaging, uh,
Yeah.
very different personality, very different background, Zen instead of
Mhm.
Vedanta,
Yeah.
same presence. And took me a little while. I went to a retreat with Adya, a small private retreat in 2001. And I was kind of struggling with, well, who's my teacher? I thought Jean was
Oh.
my teacher. I
Mhm.
don't need a teacher again. And I had to realize it's like I had to let go of that. And it felt very important actually to recognize, okay, here is my teacher now in this form.
Yeah.
And then 5 years of intense study with Adyo, which he just picked up like right where Jean left off. So, you know, looking kind of stepping back from this, again, we come to this principle. It's not the outer teacher. The function of the outer teacher is to point to the inner teacher. And some of us need more help. I did, definitely. And it was very valuable to have someone be able to say, no, not quite. And here, take a look at that. And just to radiate presence
Yeah.
and to have a clear teaching. And that really helped the orientation of the body mind and ultimately the recognition, oh, there is as much spiritual authority here as there is there. And
Yes.
then I can respect my teacher and even befriend my teacher, you know,
Hmm.
and at the same time know the knowing here is the same knowing there, that ultimately there is no difference or hierarchy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And I'm glad you shared that because I was looking for your personal story online and couldn't really, I just thank you for sharing that with us. And what do you feel the role of transmission is? What you were speaking of was transmission really, and sometimes people talk about transmission. It's that presence.
It is. It's presence. It's the sharing of presence, and via resonance. It's like there was something in me that recognized that presence was genuine, authentic, radiant in the other, like, and it was non-mental, right?
Mm.
It was a non-mental recognition. So, so-called transmission isn't about someone giving you anything. That's. I mean, energies can be, shared, and one can feel a buzz. There can be charismatic teachers, and teachers can sometimes direct energies that way. But that's not what this is about.
Mm.
The true transmission, so-called, happens by resonance. There's the recognition that this presence is shared, really, and and one as one immerses oneself in the field, right?
Yes. Yeah.
This is interesting to speak about. And we said we
Yeah.
wanted to kind of look into this field phenomena
Yeah.
because it doesn't belong to anyone. It
That's
doesn't. It doesn't refer to anyone. It's universal. It's a dimension within the human experience where we feel and recognize this shared loving awareness that
mhm.
it's fundamental. It's true to all of us. And so, by immersing oneself, there is a relative field, which is, I think, the value of being on retreat, from time to
Yeah.
time with others, with a sangha, a satsang, a group of attuned people, whatever you want to call it. I tend to not use Sanskrit much or
Yeah,
Pali.
you don't. I notice. I think that's wise. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to look for ordinary Western, I just speak of it as a spiritual gathering of people,
Yeah.
lovers of truth, or
Right. Rather than a sat song,
yeah, exactly, which tends to be, can be, and often is interpreted in a hierarchical way. You
Yeah.
sit with the teacher and receive the
They
beneficence.
have something that you don't. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
their darshan of there's the traditional Eastern, Indian, Tibetan framing that
Yeah.
tends to be hierarchical and also tends to evoke abuse, and
Yeah.
self-distrust in the student and dependency, um, and all sorts of unhealthy power dynamics.
Yeah.
So, nonetheless, there is a phenomena of sitting with a group of people, sitting with a trusted guide who knows who is attuned with their inner knowing, that activates and supports that within ourselves. And I benefited from that. It's not true for everyone, but for me, it was.
Yeah.
What is your understanding of transmission, sir?
Well, it is what you say. It's not owned by anyone, but I do notice some teachers have more of um, a transmission, a presence coming off of them. Now, that could be a resonance, right? Just a resonance between the one here and the one there. Um, but yeah, I think what you said about the student not getting dependent on it is really important because there are I do see some people who have sat with, I guess, charismatic teachers and
Mhm,
who did have that transmission of presence. It's
mhm,
just they've recognized something, but there also might be some distortions going on still, which happens.
mhm,
And so the student doesn't know how to, but they have this transmission, but I'm resonating with them, but I'm getting something from it. I'm opening deeper and this kind of confusion about it. So I find that a teacher's presence, attuned presence like that, and that transmission actually does, it's like a medicine that kind of helps everything
mhm.
unfold. So if it's there, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but
Not at all.
yeah. And I know Adya had talked about, and he's not here for us to ask him, but I remember reading something about him saying that his transmission was very big when he first woke up, and that people were kind of popping awake
Hmm.
in his groups, and he was like, "Whoa, that's," because sometimes, as we talked about last time, we can have an opening, a really deep realization, and it's we haven't quite grokked it yet. Our whole
Mhm,
system needs to adjust to it, and getting the nervous system ready. Transmission can help get a nervous system ready,
mhm.
but it also can, you know, create dependence or so. I just found that interesting when I read that.
It is an interesting phenomena that he was doing. His first early retreats were in the hills above Los Gatos at Jokoji, a little Zen center. I did not attend those retreats. I
Mhm.
joined him at Vajrapani in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Vajrapani.
But I've talked to people who were there, and I've read the same thing and heard the same thing that you said, that Adya could just via presence kind of induce um, glimpses and awakenings of some kind, and then he became aware, this things are being missed here.
Yeah,
Some process is being short-circuited. That would be my word, not his, and that he kind of needed to be more thorough and slow. Again, my interpretation, my words,
yeah,
so that the unfolding is more natural, I would say, and more thorough and more, um,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
that's important. That's the kind of, okay, we live on different levels, and so we can, if we're very kind of bright in a certain level, that can be induced in others, but it's not about inducing states, right?
yeah.
It's
Not at all.
really, we're back to meeting people where they are, and supporting and allowing a natural unfolding.
Yeah, which brings me to that's why our conditioning and our relative level stuff that we're dealing with is so much an important part of the spiritual path, and it can get overlooked. I think people are becoming more savvy and more emotionally mature, emotionally aware. There's more in the zeitgeist about trauma now than ever before. I mean,
Well, huge difference from a
I
few
mean,
decades ago. Hmm.
oh, yeah, and even, 10 years ago or whatever, when I was on boot at the gas pump, I was like banging the drum of like, why aren't more people talking about trauma in the awakening
Hmm.
scene? And now there's more people talking about it. Um, so, these things evolve. We become wiser as a collective. But I still encounter people who feel that, just the realization should be enough. So can you kind of share a little bit about why becoming embodied is so important on the spiritual path? Because,
Hmm.
you know, we could
Hmm.
talk about that for a while, but
We could embodiment, um, and also how that differs maybe from the self-improvement project,
yeah,
where one can kind of get fixated on psychological work, which is endless,
it's
and
endless.
overlook the fullness that's always here. So
Mhm.
there's a kind of a balance here to be aware of.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I think this is part of the maturation of the contemplative community as it's moved, as those traditions have infused the West for the last, whatever, 50 years, 60 years. And we've discovered the importance of um, just living this in our ordinary life, that it's not about states, and it's not about formless, just recognizing formless awareness, as liberating as that can be. And this is something Ajit talks about, and many other teachers now, is that when there's an initial opening, one can really just, it can be to feel open to the infinite nature of awareness
Hmm.
is such a revelation. It's like we're out of the box. We've been living in a box and feeling
Hmm.
confined, and we didn't know why, and we've been suffering and didn't know why, and then boom, the box opens. Maybe the box of the mind, let's say.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's such a freedom in that. One can easily get fixated on that and become attached to that. And meanwhile,
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 life is falling apart, and
exactly.
it all doesn't matter, man, because it's empty.
We're crashing around in our relationships, and oh well, it's just conditioning, and
Right.
why don't you wake up, and you know
Yeah, and
uh,
then we'll talk. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And we're miserable in our jobs, but but that doesn't matter because
It doesn't matter.
it's Maya, and
It's all
it's
illusion, so
it's
I'm gonna do it anyway. And
exactly.
and
exactly.
develop an ulcer.
Exactly. Yeah. So if, our health, our self-care, our relationships, our work, is all neglected, and so it's like a drug in that
Yeah.
sense.
Did
Like
you ever fall into that trap at all? Or
I didn't.
yeah, because I didn't either. I was like, okay, I guess this is coming up now.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I knew enough and so, trained as a therapist and I just knew, you know, it doesn't work, you know. And I think my own sense of integrity was such that
Yeah.
this relationships are important. Being in integrity in relationship is important. Being in integrity with my myself was important. Like just this kind of internal freedom was
Mhm.
beautiful, um, and revelatory and and just stay open, you know,
Yeah.
just stay open. And so no, it was just, I don't know, my own process, my own wiring, just that was never really an issue. But
Yeah.
to the point of embodiment, so embodiment, it's like, it's such a big conversation, isn't it? Because sometimes we're inclined to do a lot of self-investigation and work and therapy and before there's an awakening,
Yeah.
a genuine and deep awakening. And so the post-awakening process is much lighter as a result. And for others, it's just like, the movement towards awakening is very strong, wanting to know one's true nature. And then so that door opens, and then there's all sorts of unmet conditioning. Hello.
Yeah, that's what happened with me. Yeah,
Right, and like trauma gets flushed out and early
yeah.
attachment wounds and then there's this whole tumultuous period sometimes, even
Yes.
even where the awakening, being in touch with awake awareness subsides, and what's in the foreground of awareness is our, this tumultuous conditioning and
Uh-huh.
trauma and all. So it varies tremendously.
Going to be different for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very different, and we have to. It's very important to acknowledge and respect that.
Yeah.
Um, Nonetheless, whatever the trajectory is in terms of healing and awakening, because it can vary tremendously, because we really love the truth, there's a willingness to stay close to our experience. And that love of the truth keeps us wanting to stay aligned with it, to be true to it. Our devotion to it, really. Our devotion to what's true, not as an ideology, not a dogma, but the truth of our deepest nature, awake, loving awareness, moves us to increasing self-honesty and vulnerability, to where we're in and out of alignment with that. And that can just allow a descent of this knowing through the mind from a mental level to an emotional level. And this is, we're getting into the heart now, and
Yes.
issues of worthiness, unworthiness,
Mhm.
lovable, unlovableness. These are very deep and they go very young. This is the deep heart, and that's,
Yeah.
was my focus in that book. And really being willing to be with our experience and the depths of our heart and what, our capacity or lack of for intimacy and connection and these very subtle soul levels. So we talked a little bit about last time, that kind of archetypal level, these, gifts that we may have that are not egoic, but just life is asking them to be shared. And
Yes.
and it doesn't have to be in any dramatic form. It can be quite, subtle, as a healer, as a nurturer, as an entrepreneur, as a warrior, as a leader, as an educator, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
as that just kindness radiating out to the checker at the supermarket or,
Yeah. And
whatever.
and a quality of the heart that I always like to remind people about is just this openness, this willingness. It's like, but I'm not feeling the love. I'm not feeling compassion or kindness. That doesn't, if you're willing to meet and be open, that is heart.
It is.
That is a
Mhm.
movement of the heart to
Ver-
welcome
That's right. That
and
that willingness to be available.
Yeah.
And that willingness then allows a deep unfolding and flowering of the human, right? And so I think we're not just here to wake up,
I
beautiful
would
as it
agree.
is. Hmm?
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, and maybe in renunciant traditions it's sufficient, and maybe that's true for you. But in my experience, we're not here just to awaken to true nature, really, but to live creatively,
Hmm.
lovingly, to for this to pour through us into our ordinary life, and also, in time effect. It radiates out in the human realm, in relationship, and even in larger societal structures.
Yeah.
If we're, I mean, that happens spontaneously, and we may be inclined to move or engage, you know,
Yeah.
uh, on behalf of life.
Yeah.
In some way that's true for us. We may not be, maybe
Right.
stage of life, maybe personality, it moves many different ways, but there's an openness to like really being here,
Hmm.
not just be here now. I'm mindful of the present centered awareness. No, it's like really land here,
Hmm.
really be willing to fully enter into the human experience. And that means really opening to suffering also, the reality of suffering. This human life is so poignant. Hmm? It's like bittersweet. There's
Yeah.
beauty, incredible beauty, creativity, and often contemplative traditions accent that. It's like, okay, if you wake up, you'll be in bliss all the time. Well, with awakening comes deep, not ecstasy all the time. There may be, occasional that may arise. That hasn't been so much my path, but more of a quiet joy, just a sense of
It's
real,
very quiet.
it's a quiet joy and contentment and a deep gratitude and love, but also an awareness of so much suffering. Hmm?
Yeah.
And not just human suffering, right? So as the heart opens, as the ground deepens, our capacity, when I say our capacity, it's the capacity of awareness itself
Yeah.
through the human form to embrace and help transform that opens. And that's just a whole nother dimension, of what it means to be embodied.
Yeah. And that flowering of the heart, I mean, that really is non-duality because nothing is left out.
That's it. That's it. So our understanding of non-duality keeps expanding. Like before, non-duality was often conflated with formless awareness,
Yeah.
like as it's like as not dual, no form. But non-duality means full embrace of all experience from the most difficult. And for me, the most difficult is human cruelty.
Oh, yeah. Oof.
So what we call evil, how humans can
Yeah.
purposefully and intentionally, or kind of mindlessly and uncaringly inflict pain and suffering on others. I mean, that's a very hard thing to look at. It's
Yeah.
a very hard thing to acknowledge, a very hard thing to see. But that's part of the human experience, isn't it? And especially when people are out of touch with who they are, that kind of behavior,
Hmm.
happens so much more. So it's like to fully open to ignorance and cruelty.
Yeah.
That's so much part of the human heritage, not to get lost into it, lost
Right.
in it, not to be pulled down into a vortex of suffering, but to actually open
Yeah.
in a way that acknowledges. And that's why, again, meeting people where they are is so important because we all carry that suffering. And so the movement of spirituality is not up and out. It's not a flight into light, down and in.
Down and in.
Yeah, that spirit is not separate from matter. That spirit is not separate from ordinary life. That actually it's the essence of this life.
Yes, and as we deepen in our understanding, in our realization, and we become more embodied, we're not just meeting our own conditioning, as you say, we're meeting collective conditioning,
Hmm.
ancestral, archetypal.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you get you get it, and I would say that even as the ground opens up and there's like a deeper descent, it has felt, for me that. that feeling the collective is a bit more pronounced, I guess, because there's a
Hmm.
lot of
It's true for me too.
personal material. Yeah,
I'm
because
sorry, go ahead.
well, it's true for you too. Yeah, because there's not as much personal material that's so loud and jangly in the forefront. I mean, I still have my stuff. I mean, come on, till this body drops, I'll be looking
Exactly,
at my
exactly.
stuff. But it's not as in the forefront, loud, jangly, so I can feel just, oh, humanity.
That's it. There's less personal noise conditioning. And we open, it's like we begin to discern, okay, this is not the individual personal stuff. This is humanity,
Yeah,
and more than humanity, because, this is interspecies
sure.
suffering too.
Yeah,
It's collective.
the planet
The
itself.
planet, the planet itself. And we can begin, I mean, some people conflate their personal conditioning with the planetary or collective conditioning. And they'll say, can you tell today is especially whatever, something's happening, whatever.
Yeah,
And, I'll say, no, I can't, but if I get quiet and attune, it's like, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that collective suffering is tremendous. And people, that's one of the fears of opening and embodying. It's like, am I going to get lost in this? It's too
Mhm.
much. And it is too much for the human heart. But the good news is there's a universal heart, of
Yeah,
which the human heart is an expression.
right.
And so it's like we let the big heart, the deep heart, hold the human heart.
Yeah.
And so
We're
there's a,
not personally holding, just like you said, we're not holding space for anyone.
mhm.
We're also not personally holding all this conditioning.
Right. And knowing that and opening to that allows that too. It's like, okay, all of that is in me, but it does not define or confine who I am.
Yeah.
That's I think that's what's unfolding um,
Mhm.
in this process.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, yeah, and there are so many directions I want to go, but head, heart, gut, people ask me about that a lot. And that's really a framework that I use,
Hmm.
really, because I mean, that was my experience,
Hmm.
the awakening at the level of mind. I'm awareness, I'm not the constructed self.
Hmm.
But to me, that wasn't non-duality. That's not yet,
It's still duality. It's subtle
Still
duality.
duality. Yeah.
Hmm.
So then the heart opened, and of course all of this was bouncing around. I had a
Hmm.
heart opening at my first retreat, 3 days into learning Buddhist meditation. It was like, phew, so
There was a ripeness here.
there
So,
was a ripeness, ready to go. And and then the opening at the gut, which is, as we talked about last time, is beyond non-duality. It includes it. It's just a fact that it's all one seamless, thingless thing.
yeah, one, not one, any kind of category of experience, right?
Yes, well, it's beyond fullness or emptiness. It's beyond duality or non-duality.
Mm-hmm. It's beyond any kind of conceptual framework.
Right, which makes it so hard to talk about, which,
Impossible, in fact.
yeah, impossible to talk about. And as we spoke about last time, it's, again, this is it's not all just first here, then the gut, the gut, the ground, the opening of the ground, can happen over time. Um, yeah, what would you like to share about head, heart, and gut? Because I think it's important.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting that it unfolded this way for you, as it did for me. It's not always that way.
Yeah.
I have friends who really it started in the heart. There was just like a, you know, opening of the heart, and then actually the head came after that. It's like the mind was sort of dragged along by the heartfelt revelation of oneness. That's interesting to talk to my friends about that and realize, okay, so it happened differently for them. And more rarely, I think it can kind of happen all at once, boom, 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 or from the gut. But it seems to me, for most people, the general movement is, in a way, it's easiest to free the mind. Um,
Yeah.
it's and even though it can be quite, quite a feel like quite a prison cell. We can be very attached to our thoughts and our images of ourselves, the self-construct, the self-story. Um, it's generally the easiest to unlock. And helping to differentiate awareness from thought is really a big movement, and helping to see the limitation of thought. It's like we're not trying to stop thought. That's impossible. It can be suspended briefly. One can have very deep meditations and even go hours with very few or no thought. But that's not the point. Mind can be quiet sometimes, but it would be a kind of violence to try to stop the mind, because
Yeah.
mind thinks that's its job.
Mind's going to do mind things.
Mind does its thing, you know. It's like trying to stop walking, you know, or something like that. You need to walk. So mind needs to think, but it's more seeing the limits of the mind. Like the mind is really a good tool, good for certain things, you know, creating the internet and allowing us to have a conversation over
Right.
hundreds of miles away. But the mind cannot grasp source. Source is not a thing, and the mind can grasp things just as the hand can. So kind of being able to actually see that, like, oh, it's okay to not know. It's not a failure. The not knowing is the relaxation of ordinary mind. I'm not going to get this. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't grasp this because it's beyond grasping. So I can relax, you know. And there's a recognition, and this one, we just, with a little of attention, we can begin to notice there's always silent awareness here, regardless of whether thoughts are coming or going. I wouldn't be aware that I'm thinking without awareness, right?
Right.
I am thinking. Who is the I, right? Anyway,
Right.
there's some clues here,
Yeah. Right.
right? So all of this is kind of pointing to not only an observing awareness, but at some point recognizing there is no witness or observer.
Right.
And that's a big step. That's kind of the boom, you know, like,
Mm.
oh, infinite awareness
Right.
is having this, you know, having these thoughts. But that doesn't necessarily transpose to an emotional level, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but that kind of clears the space and allows attention
Yeah.
more easily to drop. And as you know, as you were suggesting, there's just this movement, you know, because the system is unwinding itself, you know, cognitively, emotionally, somatically,
Yeah.
in a very mysterious and unique way. And so it doesn't follow any particular path. But these are kind of basic principles. So as you were saying, even knowing oneself as infinite awareness is not non-dual awareness, because there's still a world. Like
Yeah.
I am infinite awareness. Well, what
All that other stuff.
all
Ugh.
this, what about that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting just to notice, okay, well, all right. So there's still a subtle duality. There's an
Yeah.
apparently infinite perceiver and a finite world. So that's where the heart comes in. You know,
Yes.
the heart, the recognition, and I won't, I don't need to go into my own experience with that, but it was quite interesting to
Oh
realize.
no. I'd like to hear it. What was your personal
Well,
experience
I
with?
was on retreat with Adya at Vajrapani in 2003, and you know, he was giving the talk I'd heard for 20 years, either from Jean or other teachers, that, you know, no matter how much you seek, you never get it,
Yeah.
because you are that which you seek. You know, it was, there some version of that talk was being given, but somehow there was a readiness,
Yeah.
and I was sitting quietly in meditation and just noticing, oh, there's still subtle seeking going on. There's just trying to see kind of the most brilliant object, you know, just the most finest light, diamond-like light. And the recognition was, this is absolutely futile. This search will go on forever. And then, so there was an honesty in seeing that. And then
Yeah.
a sudden recognition, oh, that that which I seek, I am. And so there was a sense of fullness. So it came in that stage, and then 2 years later, just sitting on retreat out and overlooking the ocean, and this is at Mount Madonna in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it was, you know, it just, everything fell away, and there was a seeing, oh, the seer or the seen are the same, and my jaw dropped. You know, it's like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
it's true. It's all consciousness. No one's looking out and sees that it's everything, was the how the experience was framed at the time. So those were the little, those were the shifts that were how it unfolded for me.
Well, and I do think it's interesting to note that they were two, and I had two, kind of two as well with that. That the first one, what was a flowering at the heart, a non-duality. That which I'm seeking is here,
Mhm.
is me. But then it refined later on with all phenomena.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's important that, sometimes people will touch I guess the shallow end of the pool or something and like, I got it, right? Or feel like, well, why am I still dealing with keep going, keep going,
Mhm.
keep looking for
Mhm.
duality, keep looking for subject object. Is it actually here? Always bringing oneself back to what has been discovered and what is here. Um, so this happened in two phases for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. 2 years apart. It was
Yeah.
like it took a. There was just a natural unfolding, I would say, of that, and
Uh,
um, so and that just when that's deeply seen, or let's say when it was deeply seen here, it remained. Not
it's
as it not as
abiding.
yeah, it was abiding. It just like it was. It didn't. Whereas different from a glimpse where there's
Yeah.
like seeing and then there's an opening and a closing. This was just it stayed open. There was a knowing as
Yeah,
well.
can we pause here with the abiding, non-abiding? Because
Hmm.
yeah, I mean I know some people who awakened at the level of mind and it was an abiding, like witnessing awareness, all is awareness, and it was abiding. But more often I find that it's not abiding at the level of mind, that the abiding awakening tends to really blossom at the heart. What are your thoughts on that? What have you found?
That makes sense to me. Um, um, I don't know that I have enough experience, to have a conclusion about that. That's interesting to hear. That makes sense to me. Um, mm, Certainly, I know individuals who I would say appear to have an abiding mental awakening,
Yeah.
and it has not transposed to the heart. But I don't know how
Yes.
true that is, how abiding that awareness is. I know they're certainly in touch with that kind of sense of, and I can feel it in their field. It's like there's
Yeah.
this is the interesting thing. Like when a mental awakening, as beautiful as it is, there's still a kind of top heaviness,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you have this, and subjectively it does, it has that kind of overhead, behind head, just
Hmm.
like the mind is freed, and I think probably, if I were clairvoyant and could see the energy field, it would be up there, and
Yeah.
and
And that,
interest and the
yeah.
hands tell a story. Have you noticed, Sarah? It's like when people talk about their experience, they say, yeah, I woke up and and the hands are up here, or I understand, or it's
Yeah.
in I had an insight and it's up there.
Yeah.
But this one, it's like the knowing, right? The knowing that goes out. And then there's that underground dimension. It's like, okay, and it keeps going, you
It
know.
keeps going.
It just is like, okay, let's not just stop at halfway point, in the body.
Right.
It's like, what about the whole body? And now we're getting into the instinctual centers. We're
Yeah.
getting to power, interpersonal power center, the solar plexus, getting it down into issues of sensuality and sexuality. If there's been any
Mhm.
wounding or hyperactivation or freezing or and 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 down into the pelvis and to the
Mhm.
base of the spine. And I don't know why it is, but I seem to be wired to just really pick up um, terror uh, when I sit with people. And,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of it, as you know, for various reasons, you know.
Well, that core belief, one of the earliest ones, is it's not safe to exist.
Exactly.
Just
That's
not
it.
safe to exist. Never.
Yeah.
It's not safe to be me. It's not safe to express myself. It's not safe to. just to simply exist.
Yeah, it's not safe to exist, or, and, actually, it's not an or, it's an and. I don't want to be here.
And I don't want to be here. Oh, yeah.
That's very interesting, and particularly with people who are spiritually oriented, you
Yeah.
know.
I don't really want to be here.
And,
Yeah.
and, and it's very interesting when that starts getting uncovered. It's like,
Mhm.
it seems like some people come in with the brakes on, with their heels dug in. It's like,
Yeah.
oh no, not this again.
Not this again.
Not this dense realm of suffering, right? Or I land here and it's like, oh my God, this is really the realm of suffering. and
Yeah.
and so it's
I know
very
that.
there's sometimes there's that, and
Yeah.
so there's like people come in with a lot of resistance, and
Sure.
and then there's the actual conditioning of this lifetime,
Yes.
which is, ooh, I don't want to be here. Either I'm not
Yeah.
wanted, it's too dangerous, I'm unloved, I'm not connected. I mean, there's some really dystopian states, dysphoric states is what I meant to
And
say.
the desire to escape
And then
often
I
leads
went out, I went
people
out of
on the
here.
spiritual path.
I went out of here. And then spirituality is seen as a way out,
That's right.
get out of jail free
Up and
card.
out.
Yeah, up and out. And so we've seen a lot of that flight into light. And it doesn't mean that the spiritual impulse is just that, right? But often, and there was a little bit of that in my case, I could see,
Oh, mine too. Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting to see, okay, I'm really on some deep level, some part of me is like, let's get this over with, you know. And I recognize it as resistance. And the interesting principle here is that, what we resist persists.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and when I saw that really clearly in my own case,
Uh-huh.
it was very, very sobering. It's
Yeah.
like I see that I'm in resistance to life as it is. I'm wanting to get this over with or be somewhere else. And it's like, no, it's here. That which I am looking for is here in this place, moment, being.
And even with these realizations that are so powerful and profound, sometimes there's a stretch of time for people where they're so attached to it, or it's so beautiful that it makes them want to escape even more instead of bringing them down and in, which is why, again, we're at the embodiment piece. A revelation, a realization isn't enough. It needs to really sink down into the gut, into the body eventually, so that, you know, ultimately, I mean, that this has been my experience, that the desire to either not be here or be here is like gone.
That's nice. So, it all gets down to like grasping or avoiding, doesn't it?
Right. And
Right? Like
like,
I'm going to hold on to this for dear life. Well, we're strangling life, with that,
yeah,
I can't let go, but also I don't want to be here, you know.
right.
So either way, we're in resistance, aren't we?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this, and we're back to the principles of just letting go and a profound trust
Yeah.
in the movement of life, like letting go, let the engine drop out, as you talked about.
Drop out,
Let
which
it drop out, let the ground fall away, let it, anything I need to feel, anything I need to experience, anything I need to know, I'm willing to, anything I need to let go of, I'm willing to. There's just that deep impulse,
that
right?
willingness.
That willingness to let go of everything, to experience anything,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the love of truth, I think.
Yeah. It's funny. I was a bit of, I wanted truth, but I also like didn't want it. Like I remember, um, I haven't really talked about this too much, but hearing, you know, the Dharma talks that I did when I began, and, enlightenment, awakening, there was this knowing of like, oh yeah, I think it was an impending something was coming, a knowing. And I had my heels dug in at first. I wanted to meditate to be more creative. I was an actor and a stand-up comedian. I wanted better relationships. I wanted to sleep better at night. I wanted all the stuff that maybe meditation and awakening. And I remember bargaining with life, God, reality, and saying just a little bit. I want to wake up a little bit more, but not enough so
Not
that
too much, right?
not too much so that I wouldn't lose everything I thought I needed, which I ended up losing. But it doesn't feel like anything's been lost. So
Nothing essential.
yeah, so which isn't always for some people continue doing the job that they're doing or continue with the relationships that they're in and continue with the everything. But for me, it was a radical overhaul of my life that I probably could feel as well. So I had my heels dug in for a good portion, and I was very stubborn for a while, but by the time the heart came online, it was sort of like, oh, here we are.
Mm.
Here we are, and this is the most important thing,
Ah,
you know? Wow.
well, well, there it is. It's like that inquiry. What is the most important thing?
Yeah. What do you really want?
What is the heart's desire? What do I
Heart.
really
Yeah,
want
that's good.
from the depths of my being? That's a living question.
Yeah.
And that can just, you know, be the key. Like sitting with that question, not mentally, but just,
Mhm.
just dropping it in every once in a while and listening and feeling and trusting that is very important. That's why I find inquiry in some ways more powerful than just sitting in silent meditation.
Yeah, yeah. You're an inquiry dude.
I am such, yes.
Yeah. I didn't do a lot of inquiry. I did some, but yeah, and I do it with people. I do somatic inquiry and inquiry into their experience and the holdings and the gripping, which then opens up to,
Hmm.
what is also here? What else is here besides this
Hmm.
suffering, this not? Well, there's a lightness and expanse. Ah, look at that.
Hmm.
So questioning has become a part of how I work now. But yeah, I think inquiry is really important, but we have to kind of know how to do it.
It is. It is an art.
And it's not with the mind.
It's not. No, it's an inquiry from our heart wisdom, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you said, like, oh, you know,
Hmm.
here we are.
Here we are.
And what is it that's really important? What's the most important thing? That just like comes from our depths, doesn't it? That
Yeah.
that question comes from the knowing of what the
Mhm.
most important thing is,
Right.
right? And
Right.
it arises from the depths of our being. It's not like, oh, up here, let me think about it. Not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
So, just as a side note, you're right. I've in my own work with people, it's like, okay, so what's a way of inviting this inner knowing? You have the question, what else is here, right?
Hmm.
The question I often use is, particularly with one's belief systems, is what's my deepest knowing about
I
this?
like that.
Don't think about it. I always add that piece, like what's the truth? Or what's your deepest knowing? Don't think about it.
Hmm.
There's no correct answer. It's like we're opening to a different knowing, right? That bubbles up from our depths and
Yeah.
can take the many different forms for people. It's very interesting.
Hmm.
Sometimes there's just a silent knowing, sometimes a felt sense, sometimes image arises, sometimes it's a simple word, that may come, a song, whatever, but we that's that availability, isn't it? And of course that can be invoked and evoked different ways. But I have found um, that it's that meditative inquiry is really an important complement to silent sitting
Yeah.
as well. It's a more active engagement. One is just like abiding in and out of silence and awareness, and the other invokes a more active engagement with one's knowing and experience.
Yeah. And what's your experience right now is something I ask a lot because somebody can kind of get tranced out in silence or
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's like, well, why don't you notice what's here?
Yeah, what do you notice right now? What are you experiencing right now? Yeah,
Yeah.
that brings one more intimate with experience, and that that invites an unfolding too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just sensing the body, like what are you sensing, and where is that, and how is that, and but what's interesting then, there's a subtle difference here I've noticed, which is like the way I was trained as a therapist is, well, let's go into it.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, what I've learned is, okay, so there's some constriction, some contraction. Let's let that go for a minute and rest back into a sense of open awareness and take a minute or two. And then from that, just invite, welcome this in without an agenda to fix or change. And
Yeah.
it's subtle, but a very important difference, you know, of being with experience. And it really, I find, is very facilitative of a natural unfolding.
Yes, instead of being engulfed by experience and going right into the center of it, to
Hmm.
it's just sitting back into the seat of your being, as I like to say, just the seat
Hmm.
down and in. And from that place, which is a movement of the heart, let's welcome this in. And at some point, well, that which is welcoming is you.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
yeah. So the ground, because your book is The Deepest Ground, which again we go into a bit more, I think maybe I don't even know what we talked about now, but it's just delightful.
We did talk about it somewhat.
We did. But we covered a lot in the other video as well. I just kind of want to kind of close with something more about the ground and about how we can open to it because it once somebody has had an opening at the heart and non-dual realization, it's abiding, let's say, and they want the ground to open, they want to have these further shift. It doesn't really seem like there's a lot we can do except for noticing where we hold and brace and our reflexive controlling, and where it sits in the body. So can you speak a bit about that
Yeah,
maybe?
I mean that's really the fundamental of it is like first it's like being aware, uh, mm, being aware of just that, like how there will be a clench, and that's generally associated with the issues of trying to be in control, um, mm, and trying to be safe, you know, and and then being curious about that. It's like first is to kind of understand, okay, this is a zone of human experience that's not well described in spiritual literature and even
Mm.
in some psychological literature. So it's just like, as I mentioned in our last talk, when Adya talked about this existential grip in the gut,
Mm.
we're kind of holding on to a root there. Like that teaching, that pointing really signaled to me, pay attention. So like
Yeah.
there's more here. So understanding the terrain actually is quite helpful and
Yeah.
having a kind of a loose model or understanding of that, which is why I wrote the book, really, is to kind of
Yeah.
help illumine understanding of this zone. So we actually start recognizing and paying attention to it. Because often we do clench, we do control in ways that are so automatic and familiar that they we're not aware of them.
Yeah.
So we start to become aware of them. And so they're invited into conscious awareness. They've been going on below the surface, more or less underground. And
Mm-hmm.
we realize, okay, and very often, there's this kind of control, trying to be safe, avoidance of fear. And we realize, oh, these are not obstacles. These are actually portals.
Yeah.
This is not something to avoid or transcend. This is a way to actually deepen into the intimacy with myself and the whole of life. and it's a different level. So there's that kind of, okay, I'm willing, that I'm willing to be available. I'm willing to explore. That willingness, that understanding and that willingness is really the most important thing. And so, I think, and there's that vulnerability, that honesty, that not, taking oneself as complete or incomplete, but just, okay, experience is unfolding here.
Yeah.
I'll be with it, and having that understanding. So what I find is, and this is often difficult to get in touch with by oneself. What it can happen, and it does happen, and things spontaneously open and unfold of their own, as they've happened with you and me. But I have found working with people uh, very often, because there's early childhood material here around safety,
Yeah.
and there's such a strong repression of this material that it really helps, and often themes of feeling disconnected and alone, overwhelmed,
Yeah.
that having an attuned human guide there to support you and meet you uh, really helps facilitate that unfolding, particularly when there's early childhood material, and most of us have it. Most
Yeah.
most of us, there's you
Most of
know
us do.
yeah. I mean, I was alluding to my big shakeout with the abandonment, fear, that, and I had never realized, even though I was a therapist, I hadn't quite framed that I was afraid of being abandoned
Yeah.
by my primary caretaker if I misbehaved. But on some level, that was the program. It's like, I need to show up a certain way. I'm going to be abandoned and I'll die. It made no sense rationally, because
Of course.
my mom was a good mom. I mean, truly, loving and steady, and she had her stuff, and I reacted to it, and on some level, there was an abandonment fear,
Yeah.
and it took me a long time to actually get in touch with that
Mhm.
sufficiently that there was a willingness for that to start to shake out.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people get surprised and get into their head about, but I had a good upbringing, but I didn't have trauma or nothing bad's
Mm,
happened to me, but it's like this is what's here. This is what is here in it, and just as you illustrated, it just results out of misunderstanding, you know.
mhm,
All the
mhm.
elements congeal in a way that belief arose for you and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
somatic.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I was never abandoned in
Yeah.
any noticeable way. It never happened, but somewhere there was a sense of threat, in the young psyche,
Yeah.
that could happen, and my life organized, my relational life subtly organized around that. There was a vigilance. It's like, oh, is she or he a safe person
Mm-hmm.
to contact? And there was always a kind of anxiety in the
Yeah.
background,
Yeah.
that didn't make sense, but was visceral, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, it's a big conversation. There are many subtleties here.
Oh,
Um, I mean, since you're mentioning the book, I think my book is, a good guide to this area, and there
yeah.
are, explorations, inquiries, pointers that, for those of your viewers who are interested, I think would be, at least some of them, of benefit. So.
Yeah, I think the book is great for anybody who wants to embody spirituality, who wants to embody just being alive. So forget head, heart, and gut, and you want to go deeper, and you want to. It's that's what I really like about it is it's not just about that shift from heart into gut, which is profound, and um, but it's about embodiment the whole way through the journey.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not just like a post-awakening description.
No,
No,
not at all.
because a lot of this, material, is in our experience, or can be in our experience, and can be worked with in a skillful and loving way,
Yeah.
regardless of where we are in our spiritual journey.
And I think it can be really helpful for neurodivergent people who have interoception challenges. sometimes, which can be developed for most people. I know it did for me. Once I got on the spiritual path and had to really look, well, what am I feeling and what are those sensations? And um, so it can be really helpful for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to guide us through a short 5-minute little meditation? Is that possible?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Pressure's on. When I did stand-up comedy, you can get on stage for 5 minutes. Somebody just dropped out.
Uh, sure. You want to, is there a theme you'd like me to guide towards, or shall we just,
The ground, maybe
okay.
whatever. And it doesn't have to be 5 minutes. I mean,
Yeah. Okay. Briefly, we'll do a little,
yeah, that's good.
just a little taste here as well as a kind of, as a pointer to greater intimacy with the underground space. Okay.
Great.
All right. So I invite your listeners and viewers to close their eyes or slightly lower them and take a few slow, deep breaths. And to recognize there's nowhere to go, nothing you need to get or change. So the mind can relax. And just letting attention drop quite effortlessly down and in. To the core of your body. And feel the weight of your body held by whatever you're sitting upon. Sensing your breath in the lower belly. You can put your hands on your belly if you like. You don't need to. That can help anchor attention. So we're starting to become familiar with the lower half of our body. Feeling the lower belly, the pelvic bowl, upper legs, the lower legs and feet. Just letting your body be held by gravity and settling into that sense of being held. And then feeling the breath even lower, as if it's arising from the ground and emptying out into the ground. So in-breath arising from the depths and emptying out into the depths. And paying particular attention to the exhalation and the release of the breath. Letting the breath completely empty out into the underground space. And so we're sensing the underground space, the openness, exploring, not efforting. Each exhalation, letting go. opening. So as the system opens to the underground open space, as we open to openness, if you will, very often resistance arises. We like to feel a solidity to our ground. And this may or may not happen for you, but if it does, just noticing, not trying to fix it or change it, but being curious. Allowing, accepting. And if no resistance arises, then a deepening, attunement. Just noticing how deep is this open underground spaciousness? How deep and how wide? So even though we'll be ending the meditation at this point, I would invite you to just, if you'd like, stop the video or the audio and continue in this exploration as long as you like. And then take at least a minute or two to reorient yourself when you feel complete with it. Slowly open the eyes and relax and stretch. But for now, we'll end the exploration. I invite you to slowly open your eyes. Just notice, what is it like to be in touch with this underground vastness, openness? It's very often when we open our eyes, we reconstellate a separate sense of self. The eyes are a particularly powerful sensory organ. So it's interesting to kind of make this transition consciously from the depths of openness to more ordinary perception. It's also interesting that in this process of discovering our depths and openness, the eyes relax and the seeing is less and less of a grasping and trying to identify and differentiate, and more of a seeing from openness itself, seeing from behind. And this is the nature of the opening of the ground, is that initially it can localize beneath the body, and then it generalizes to 360 all around. And the whole body is, in a way, infused with this grounded awareness.
Just beautiful. Thank you, John Prendergast, author of Your Deepest Ground and The Deep Heart, as well as many other wonderful books. Thank you for talking with me today. And for those of you listening, I hope this was helpful. And thank you. Till next time.